Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone. Yes, it's July, another month down. We made it through half the year. Now we're starting the second half. Yes, Christmas is coming up and holiday. So let's get in shape this summer. Simply Snacking, who's bringing these episodes to you, is a great choice. So they have great flavors of beef and chicken, and they're individually wrapped, so you could just throw them in your purse or in your car or wherever you need to be. So it's a go-to. I'm actually out and I have to order some more, but you can order and get it. So thank you for supporting the podcast and Simply Snacking. They're getting busy too, so that's good news. All right, take care. Bye-bye. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice, because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit, and always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hello, and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Now, this is a guy, I shouldn't have him on because he wrote a book about us doctors too, but he's one of them too, so I guess it's all right. Lies My Doctor Told Me. Everyone knows who he is. Ken Berry, welcome, man.
Hey, thanks, Doc. Good to talk to you again.
It's great to have you on. And, I want to have you on, one thing because I want people to have, I've been so fortunate in our low-carb meetings and things just to be able to see people behind the scenes and kind of observe what kind of people they are. I won't tell them everything about you, but, I just saw you just hanging out, being cool to people, talking to people, people all night, all day. And you saying, hey, look, if you don't ask me the question, that's on you, not me. I'll be here to talk to you. And that is so awesome because, I think we're being docs, going to a standard medical conference. Doctors will give a talk and then they're out. They don't talk to anyone. They're not going to engage with the peasants like us doctors. They're going to go up to their fancy hotel room and do whatever they're doing.
Well, I think that's a reflection on just what quality of doctor they are. Because if you're indeed a good doctor, you should enjoy teaching people and helping people understand their health and improve their health. That should be pretty much the most enjoyable thing in your life. And indeed, you're right. Some of the first conferences I went to, definitely medical conferences, but even keto conferences, I would go and there would be somebody who would fly in and they would get there 30 minutes before their talk. They would talk and then they would fly out. And I'm like, well, I guess that's nice. Plus they got an honorarium and get all their, everything paid for. But I'm coming to help these people. I'm not coming to impress them or sell a book. And so I think people have different motives and they have different goals. And my goal is for everybody at that conference to walk away with better health than they came in the front door with. And so the only way I'm going to make that happen is if I answer their questions.
Yeah, and I think you have this gift of just being kind of an old school doc, just going, look, I'm going to tell you the story about a dog, whatever, Blue, right? Yeah, stuff like that. That's just cool. And you draw people in because you're just yourself and real. And I think a lot of people have this image of doctors just being on this pedestal and hoity-toity or whatever word you want to use, but it's cool to see that because ultimately if you're in the lab and you're doing stuff and you never interact with patients, that data never gets out to them. So how do I explain it in a way, or if I explain it in a way you have no clue what I'm saying because I use big words and want to impress you with my knowledge base,
right?
What do we do to fix this system?
Well, so then you start talking about like the results of research. Well, if the results cannot be explained to and are not applicable to the common man, then is that research very useful at all? I would opine that it is not very useful at all. If I can't explain it to a regular dude or a regular chick and also apply it to their life and improve their health, then that research really didn't help me or help them. And you hit on it again. I think some people, when they answer questions, they're trying to impress, right? And so they'll use the biggest Greek and Latin words that they know. And I'm not trying to impress anybody. If you don't like me, you can kiss my ass. I'm trying to help you be healthier. And if you're interested in that, then I'm interested in you. But if you're waiting for me to impress you, then I'm not interested in that interaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's your nature. That's kind of my nature too. I don't want to sit and argue with you. And I saw, Ben Bickman, one of the great scientists, getting picked on by someone who has no clue about the science, and they're wrong, and he's right. And he's such a good person that he said, I'm not going to debate you on this. We can talk privately if you want, and I'll educate you because I happen to be the expert in this area. You know what I mean? I've done the most research and had the most clinical experience, those kind of things.
Yeah, I would only argue with Professor Ben Bickman maybe about raising sheep or cutting down trees. But if it's anything in his wheelhouse, he's one of the world leading authorities on it. Why would I argue with him?
Well, it's not even about arguments, being respectful, but, putting a video of him talking and then saying this guy's an idiot, he has no idea what he's saying. I mean, those kind of things, I don't think there's any place for that. And I think you and I are those type of guys. I see you, and I've seen you get attacked by people who are jealous of your success, and you think, he's right in what he's saying. What are you talking about? And it's just amazing how I've seen Jason Fung come under attack, and Professor Noakes obviously, and Gary Fetke, and you think, gosh dang it, how do you rise above?
Well, I keep my primary goal. What is my primary goal? Is it to convert that guy? No, I don't care what that guy thinks. My primary goal is, for example, when I'm on Twitter. Twitter is a very rough and tumble place, right? Twitter, people love to call you names and denigrate your bona fides. But in the end, there are millions of people on Twitter who are metabolically unwell, who are suffering every single day from inflammatory conditions. I tweet to help those people. And so if somebody wants to jump up in my face and be like, you're just a doctor, you don't know anything about nutrition, whatever, I don't even argue. I don't even engage those people because I'm not on Twitter to argue or to convert, somebody who doesn't even understand what I'm talking about. I'm there to help people feel better and live better lives. So I think as long as you keep that primary motivation, that needs to be your primary motivation as a doctor. And you keep that in mind. It's literally, I just laugh when somebody does that. And sometimes I'll even heart their comment, or I'll say something like, are you certain about this? Right. And it's just like, I mean, I want him to keep thinking, because I want that guy to keep thinking too, Brian. There's a prominent doctor on Twitter who's been very negative about the low carb space. And he's currently playing around with eating a few sticks of butter a day and watching what it does to his lipids, right? And so I'm like, oh, you better be careful, doctor. You'll hear the bell ring if you do too much of that, right? Because he'll see the HDL come up, he'll see the triglycerides go down, and he'll have to account for that because he's eating all that saturated fat. And so I actually love it. And I think there are several very prominent anti-low-carb doctors and dietitians and nutritionists on Twitter who are at heart honest people, and they really truly want to know what the truth is, and they really want to spread the truth. And those people are in danger because they're gonna have to at some point admit they were wrong about calories in, calories out, and about a plant-based diet. They're gonna have to admit I was wrong, just like I did, and say, yeah, Barry was right the whole time. Right? I'm sorry, yeah, Barry was right.
Yeah, that's a hard thing. And it's a hard thing for doctors to say, and I just had this discussion with Professor Noakes, it's like, it's so hard for doctors to say, I've been saying this for the last 20 years, but I was wrong. I'm going to change what I'm doing. And I looked at new data, but so many people refuse. They said, this is what I was taught. This is what it is. And I'll bring it up because, I am really not one to pile on. And when you went through hard times in life, you had your clinic and your house burned down. Like, how far apart were those two?
7 months.
7 months apart. Your house burns down. Your business burns down first, right? Then your house burns down. Yep. And I see these med students on Twitter going, look, that's what you deserve. I'm thinking, there's no respect. And first of all, even if I don't like you, when you go through something like that, I want to have some compassion. Go, man, I'm sorry about your house. We may not agree on anything, but I'm really sorry you're going through that because I know how I would feel if that. And to have the venom, I remember sitting back thinking, you know what? And so people started attacking this person. I said, hey, he made a mistake. I think it's just a dumb thing. And you say something dumb and then you want to, then he
Yeah.
doubles down and triples down and quadruples down. And you think, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Like,
And that guy wound up sending me a pseudo apology via email, kind of a tongue in cheek, I'm sorry, but I kind of meant it, that kind of apology.
yeah.
But I want to read a direct message I got on Twitter. I want you and your listeners to hear this. So this is a guy, and I'm not going to mention his name. He's an advanced practice nurse. And for the first few years I was on Twitter, he was nipping at my heels constantly about saturated fat and about total cholesterol and all the typical things. So he sends me a direct message on Twitter, and he says, "Hey, Dr. Berry, I have to admit that it's been a struggle to accept that the carnivore diet is a healthful eating pattern, but I've been on it for 9 months now and feeling better than I have felt in the last 2 decades." Now, this was a low-fat, plant-based, saturated fat will kill you guy. Okay, hardcore, mouthy, always tweeting. Tim Noakes is a criminal. Gary Fettke needs to be put in jail. He said, "You won't get any more heckling from me. In fact, I was just on Dr. Baker's podcast, and I'll be a nurse advocate for anyone interested in meat-based diets. Much respect." Now,
Wow.
Right? How powerful is that? That this guy was able to put aside his feelings and accept the science. But what if I had been constantly denigrating this guy, talking about his mama, calling him names? It would have taken him years longer to admit this, that, hey, you were right. But the fact that I didn't engage with him in a negative way, I just let him say what he said, and I moved on to the next tweet. There was a space there. When he did hear the bell, he's like, "Oh, shit, eating fatty red meat's actually good for you, not bad for you. Crap, I've been wrong." He had space where it wasn't going to be too painful if he made that apology.
Yeah, and that's a person I respect, because they said, "Let me try it myself and see." And if it's bad, they would have attacked you worse. And if it was good, then they say, but they didn't have to send you that message. That says that's something about character too, to say,
Yeah.
you were actually right on that. Because I remember listening to some people, I go, "They're so wrong on this. There's no way." And then you go, "Oh, maybe it is. Maybe there is something to this gut microbiome thing. Maybe there is something to this stress level. Maybe there is something to sleep, And so we have to have this open mind to be able to think. And I love a person like that who would take the time to send you a message after being a jerk all the time, because it's hard when you don't like someone. You don't want them to, you don't want to say they were right and I was wrong, especially when that's their area of expertise.
Yep.
But that's what they were taught, and that's what you and I were taught. And I was teasing you at the beginning, but lies my doctor told me was all these things that we were just told from generation to generation that everyone believed was true. And if you don't toe the party line, you're out.
Right. And if you in any way think of yourself as a scientist or as a parascientist, right, you're around the literature and you try to talk in a science-based fashion, then there's really not any room for emotion. And so anybody who gets emotional about this stuff, all you're doing is revealing a weakness either in your argument or in your character. That's all you're revealing about yourself. And so people who attack vegans, I'm 100% opposed to that. Like there are vegans who will remain vegans for an extra decade because some carnivore was mean to them. And so even though their health is suffering, their teeth and hair is literally falling out, they'll remain a vegan because of that asshole carnivore who was mean to them. You get me?
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
that is have respect. This is not emotional. This is about 1 + 1 = 2, whether you currently like that answer or not. But that's what it is. And so we have to be collegial with everybody, even the guy that doesn't have a profile picture and only has 1 follower. Either just ignore him, mute him. You don't have to block people. You can just mute people so you don't see their messages. There's a ton of ways to do this diplomatically so that you're not closing doors. Because if I've closed off all the doors, then why as a truth teller would I close doors? Right? That doesn't make any sense. Why would I block people? Why would I close doors? I'm going to leave all the doors open because I want everybody to discover the benefits of a proper human diet, right?
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point you're bringing up, because a lot of times they'll say you're a tribalist, you just believe this, and I'm like, that's not, I've never said that, I've never believed that. So as a matter of fact, one of the ladies, and I don't know if you were at this conference, but there was someone was kind of making a joke, assuming there were no vegans at the low carb conference, and he made a derogatory remarking about vegans, and she stood up and said, wait a minute, let me get the mic. And they got into this debate. I actually met up with her afterwards, and I'm actually probably going to have her on the podcast because I like her. She knew she was outnumbered, and she stood up for what she believed. She goes, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay, cool, I get your justification. And she's, not everyone has to do what I'm doing, and she's making a food, the product I have no financial interest is called Keho, like Keho, and she's making a vegan keto product. So if you want to be vegan and do keto, cool. Like, welcome to the club. Let's all join together. She said, why are we separating and fighting over this stuff?
Right.
We happen to think that meat might be better, nutritionally values and all this stuff, but some people, it doesn't work for them. So what do? Right? Say you're a terrible person. We don't like you. No, you say, hey, what works for you? What works for me? Okay, cool. We can go and, have some scotch later or something, right?
Yep. And try to always leave the door open. I always say, well, I'm so glad that's working for you currently. Right? Because that leaves a crack in the door, doesn't it? So that a year from now, 2 years, 5 years from now, when their health starts to suffer because they're developing vitamin or mineral nutrition deficiencies, they'll be like, he did say currently, didn't he? Maybe I should go back and revisit all this.
Yeah, no, and that's the important thing, is giving people the space to say, okay, it works for you. If your religion is working for you, I'm not going to convert you to my religion. Right. But if you're a train wreck and I say, well, maybe you think about this, maybe you'd be nicer to people. Right? Yes. You're going to call fight with everyone on Twitter all day. So yeah, there's a lot to that where you kind of have I think you and I have been around long enough. I've been around probably longer, but
way longer. Yeah.
Way longer. You can see my gray hairs. You don't have any, man. I'm a little jealous. You're just a better looking, smarter, taller guy than me. Otherwise, we're pretty much the same.
We're like, remember Twins with Schwarzenegger and DeVito?
Yeah.
I got the good thing. That's what it is.
That's right. I mean, I take a picture with you and I'm like the top of my head showing. And I'm like, this is why did I not take it in the picture here? But, but seriously, I mean, all you're doing, and I've always seen you as someone who stands up for what you see as truth, and you kind of, you don't poke you don't get into people's face completely, but you say, look, have you thought about it this way? You kind of do in a way, and you're not afraid to get into controversial areas and step in and talk about, am I going to get kidney failure if I do keto? I mean, you've tackled some of the really important issues. So obviously you're doing a lot of research and reading and talking to experts and having an opinion. I never see you come across as someone who, you don't know what you're talking about, and you just say something to cause a wave, right? Or just to argue for
my granddaddy taught me when I was a young boy, if you don't know what you're talking about, boys, shut the hell up. And I've always followed that advice. And so you'll see me sometimes, somebody asks a question, I'll be like, I'll have to defer on that. I'm not sure. I'm never, especially if it's a controversial issue, it would be idiotic for me to throw out a boisterous opinion when it's controversial, and then I also don't know what I'm talking about. No, that sounds like a perfect time to shut up to me.
Yeah, it's good just to be quiet and not, I think it was Twain said something to the effect is, it's better to be quiet and let someone think you're stupid instead of speaking out and confirming it.
Yep. And my father loved to tell me that Twain quote. I've heard that many times as well. Because when I was younger, obviously, Brian, I was young and immature and full of, testosterone. And so I was mouthy and I had an opinion about everything, even if I didn't know what I was talking about. And so I had, older members of my family kind of pull me aside and say, hey, if you don't know what you're talking about, shut up. Go read a book, learn about it. Then you can have an opinion. So that's kind of been my strategy.
I've had people tell me stuff with great confidence that they're correct on this topic, and then I repeat it or I look at it and go, wait a minute, that's not right. But they're confident that they're right, but they're totally wrong,
Yep. And, we're taught not to talk about politics or religion at the dinner table. And it's not because they're impolite. I disagree with that. I think it's because they're very likely to cause an emotional response if you step on someone's toes. And nutrition is very much akin to that, isn't it? People believe in their personal nutrition beliefs almost in a religious fashion. And very often they got their nutritional practices from their parents or their grandparents. So basically, if you say something bad about your diet, you're effectively talking about their mama.
Yeah,
now, they don't consciously think that, but subconsciously, that's exactly feels the same way. If you said, your mama's so ugly, right? It's the same exact thing in their heart. And so we always have to lead with our brain and try to talk to their brain, but you can't ever forget the recipient's heart. Because if you rough that up, the brain's going to turn off. You're never going to get in there and be able to say, hey, let's talk about this rationally.
Yeah, and that's really important. And I see that among scientists and researchers too, where you see they get into these huge fights about CECO and what, calories in, calories out versus insulin model. And it could be a combination of the two. There may be a lot of middle ground that we can agree on, and say, okay, what's best for the patient? But people get so arrogant. They're like, they're going to die on that hill. They're not going to change their views no matter what the evidence shows, whatever the study is. Like, here's my patient who, and that's why I love, I just had Professor Noakes on and we were talking, and I said, were you always kind of a, stand up for what you believe and fight the system? He said, no, I was a shy, quiet kid. And then he started seeing how they were wrong. He said, they said when I was in 1976, when I was a long distance runner doing all this stuff, they said, you won't die of a heart attack if you're a long distance runner ever. And he said, I know two people who died of heart attacks as long distance runners, but he was also tying that into the point. He said back then to find young athletes dying, you'd have to fly all over the world for 2 years to find a couple cases to make a case report, basically. Yep. And he says, we're seeing a devastating increase. So when you start seeing stuff, our job as docs is to observe. And so Tro and I have gotten in trouble before because I said, this is weird. I'm seeing this. I can't explain why it's happening. Like, as you know, in the low carb, you say, oh, they went low carb and they're happier now. Oh, their back doesn't hurt. And you feel like a used car salesman or a snake oil salesman, but you're saying, we're observing that. We don't know why. And then I talked to Ben Bickman. He goes, oh, Brian, here's why. Blah, blah, blah. He throws out all the science behind it. Like, okay. He goes, it makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah. And for the first few years in my medical practice, Brian, when I was recommending a ketogenic diet as a temporary weight loss hack to my obese and severely obese patients, I would get those anecdotal reports all the time. My knee pain's gone, my heartburn's gone, my psoriasis is so much better, my whatever, right? But I was hesitant for probably 2 years to talk about that because I didn't understand the physiology behind it. But now I have seen, since then, I've gotten my Guyton out and I went through the physiology again. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. No, this actually they taught us this our first year of med school, right? In cell and molecular biology and physiology and biochemistry and pathophysiology, all the pathways are there. How eating a low carbohydrate, uninflammatory diet makes things stop hurting and makes things get better. It's almost like you stop poisoning your body. When you do that, it starts to heal. It seems miraculous, but it's not. It's just physiology.
How long were you in practice before you started looking at like low carb or saying, hey, can we do something different and not just throwing drugs at everything? Did you start out that way with that mindset?
No. I was classically trained allopathic medicine at a state university, University of Tennessee, Volunteers, go Vols, we got a half semester of nutrition training the second year of med school. We got 1 day a week for half a semester of behavioral science, and then 1 day a week for half a semester of nutrition. That's how important they thought behavioral science and nutrition was at UT.
That's probably more than I got, man. I went to USC.
So I didn't think nutrition was important at all, but it began to matter to me when I got fat. And that's when I was like, whoa, because I think I've told you before, living in the South, you cannot be a car mechanic whose car won't start. Nobody will bring their car to you. They're not idiots, right? They're very common sense people. And so also you're not going to take weight loss advice from a fat doctor. And I would tell patients, Mr. McGillicuddy, you need to lose a few pounds. And Mr. McGillicuddy would look down at my belly and then back up at me and be like, okay, doc, I'll work on that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same thing. We're all in that same boat, and we're like, we're doing the ADA's recommended diet. We're doing everything right, and you're gaining weight. Like, what the heck is this?
That's exactly what happened to me, and so that's why I started looking. And I read Atkins. I bought a copy of the diet, his Atkins Diet Revolution for 50 cents at a rummage sale, and I got a copy of Taubes's book, Case Against Sugar, and The Primal Blueprint by Sisson, and The Paleo Diet by Cordain. Those are my 4 first books when I was like, I kind of actually see there's almost like an overarching paradigm here. Like they're each coming at it from different directions, but if you peeled everything away, they're all kind of saying sort of the same thing, right? So maybe there's some kind of internal nugget of truth that they're all bumping against from different angles tangentially, but they're basically pointing at the same thing, saying this is the answer. And so then I started hearing about keto, and then when I started keto, man, that was it, because I did paleo for a few years, and my paleo was very high carb, lots of yams and sweet potatoes, lots of quinoa, lots of vegetables and fruit juice smoothies, and I was steadily getting fatter and fatter and more pre-diabetic, right? And so only when I adopted keto, that's when I started to lose fat. Abruptly, I reversed my prediabetes. I think my highest A1C was 6.1. And I didn't even know to check C-peptide or fasting insulin back then. I didn't even know enough to do that, right? So I don't know what those were, but I'm sure they were sky high. But I was inflamed and miserable. And so, when I started a real whole food, one ingredient keto diet, not keto shakes and keto bars and cakes and cookies and pies, but just basically a lot of fatty meat and eggs with the yolk and a little bit of veg, a few nuts, a few berries. Immediately, my health started to turn around. And the human desire is to say, there's something in this diet that is healing me, right? And that's kind of the Western mindset. If there's a problem, you have to add something. You have to buy something. You have to take a supplement, take a prescription. But that's actually backwards thinking. Because what I had done is I had removed a bunch of things from my diet, right? That's why I was healing, not because I had added some secret magical phytonutrient or zoonutrient. That's not what it was happening here. I was just eating real food and not adding the high carb, highly processed, inflammatory junk. And so then I started really digging in to the literature and the physiology of this. How's that possible? Because by that point, I'm 3 or 4 years into recommending this to my patients. I had had hundreds of people with bone knee arthritis who were literally considering having knee replacement. Say, dude, my knee doesn't hurt anymore. Does this diet do that? I'd heard that so many times. And that specific example is very telling because I had x-ray in my clinic. I was a radiologic technologist before I went to medical school. So I was very comfortable reading plain films. So I had a tech. I interpreted my own x-rays at the clinic. And so I had a 2 view of their knee. I knew it was bone on bone. And so after about the 10th time, I'm like, go down to x-ray. I'm going to x-ray this knee again. I got to see. It looked exactly the same, Brian.
Yeah,
still bone
amazing.
on bone.
You take
but
the inflammation out.
No pain. And I was not proselytizing, hey, keto will make your knee pain go away. So there was no placebo effect at play here. I was recommending to lose weight. That was it. But they were coming back with all these anecdotal things that they're like, booyah, I don't need my Nexium anymore. Booyah, I don't need my Celebrex anymore. And I'm like, what the hell? And that's when I really just dove head first and basically went back to medical school with regards to cell and molecular biology, to biochemistry and physiology, because those actually, it's funny, those were my 3 least favorite subjects in med school. Hated them. Did the least I could to get by. Now they're all I think about. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, it's amazing. It is. I mean, so much of that, like nutrition, all these things, insulin. I mean, Jason Fung had a huge influence on me, teaching about insulin resistance and high insulin levels and fasting and all this crazy stuff. Because I saw in a patient, I said, how are you losing weight? I'm killing myself trying to lose weight. I'm working out 6 days a week and I can't lose a pound. And you're doing it easy. Just fasting twice a week, eat no carbs those 2 days. And the other days I eat whatever I want, but I'm not really that much I'm not hungry anymore. So I don't eat as much. You're like, how can that be? Right. And you start thinking about this insulin, and you look at, like, in our training, no one ever said check an insulin. I have to pick your brain for a second since I got a free consult here. Insulin C-peptide. See, I'm a cheap guy, and I can get insulin level for like $12.95 for my cash-paying patients. C-peptide's a lot more expensive. So my patients like Ken Berry over there, and that big mouth guy over there, the southerner out there, the tall guy, the good-looking one. He's saying get a C-peptide, not insulin, or get insulin and C-peptide. What do you think, man?
So I think fasting insulin is probably the best, and it is cheaper. I think C-peptide's about $30-$35.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you look at where does C-peptide come from, how does insulin form in the beta cells of the pancreas? It's actually created as pre-pro insulin, and then you break off a piece and you've got pre-insulin, and then you break off another piece, which is C-peptide, and then you've got a C-peptide, one molecule of that, and then one molecule of insulin. So they're literally 1 for 1. And so C-peptide is an excellent proxy marker for insulin production by the pancreas. So 2 examples where fasting insulin is not going to help you. Number 1, if you're not fasted, the fasting insulin is not going to help you because it's by definition fasting. Whereas C-peptide is not as forgiving as a C-peptide, but it's more forgiving. And so if someone said, well, I ate breakfast, but it's 3:30 p.m., I can still check a C-peptide. So as a practicing clinician, you understand logistics are at play here. I can't have everybody, 45 people come in at 8 a.m. or my lab tech will shoot me. And so that's number one. Then number two, if somebody's injecting exogenous insulin,
exactly. Yeah, that's when I use. That's when you can't. You have no choice. You have to use the.
You can't check the fasting insulin because it's going to be affected. And so for those two reasons, and the fact that if you pay cash for C-peptide, it's $30-$35. That's not terrible. Most people can swing that at least once a year, and it gives you such great information about how much insulin their pancreas is having to make to keep their A1C at whatever level it currently is. Because as well as I do, you can have somebody with a normal hemoglobin A1C, and the average doctor would say, boom, perfect, I'll see you in a year. But their fasting insulin and or C-peptide are sky high. They're hyperinsulinemic, very insulin resistant. They're literally pre-diabetic, but the doctor's blind to that because they don't know about these two tests that are so powerful. You can actually use a fasting insulin or a C-peptide to predict type 2 diabetes up to 10 years before it happens.
Yeah, and that's a key, and that's so important. That's what people. You didn't just wake up with type 2 diabetes one day, right? I mean, it was a progression, and we see the damage done before you get this diagnosis of A1C. And I just tweeted something today, being a smarty, but I just said, look, all we're gonna have to do with this diabetes epidemic that's happening, we could fix it in very quickly. All we have to do is change the definition of what diabetes is, and then all of a sudden, we'll look smart, and we get to give ourselves a raise for curing everyone. On paper, they'll look great, but in reality, we're in trouble.
Yeah, just raise the normal A1C up to 7,
and you'll up to 12.
You'll cure millions of people with type 2 diabetes right off the bat. And you laugh about that, but that's actually been done with other lab values. That's been done with vitamin D. They keep lowering the vitamin D normal, right? Because it used to be 40, now it was 30. I think some labs is now 20 is normal. And then total testosterone. Used to anything under 350 was abnormal, and now some labs it's down to 250. If it's 251, you're normal, and that's not normal. But yes, and so we laugh about just adjusting the A1C reference range, but that's not really a joke because
we're seeing that with insulin. You look at the normal insulin, like, oh, it's 25, it's normal. That's not normal. That's not good at all. But they're using it on a sick population. So since we're talking about labs, we might as well tie into, you have a book coming out, Common Sense Labs. And I think that's so great. I think it's so important because I'm a minimalist. I hate to get all these labs that don't mean anything. So, a lot of practitioners out there just don't know what to get. And when I talk insulin to doctors who don't know low carb or metabolic disease, they don't know what to do with it. So they won't order it because they're like, I don't know what to do with the answer.
Right, exactly. And so as well as I do that the LabCorp menu book is this thick of lab. Like there's literally, anytime a doctor says, okay, we checked all your labs and they all look good. No. If they checked all your labs, it would cost $42 million, and they would need to probably a pint and a half of blood to check all your labs. So what they mean is, I checked all your labs that I understand how to interpret and that I think are relevant to you at your current situation. That's what they mean by that. But that's a long sentence to have to say 40 times a day when you're calling back lab results. So they say, I checked all your labs and they're all normal. And so the more I got into this, the more I kept seeing this. The patients would go to their doctor and say, hey, I want you to add a fasting insulin and or a C-peptide. And the doctors would flat out refuse. And they would say, wouldn't even know what to do with that. Or that's not going to help me at all, which is effectively true because all they want to do is just put you on more medicine anyway. They have no hope of reversing anything, right? And so I kept talking to my friend Kim Howerton, the ketonist. And
Kim, she's great. We went to the salt
I love her. And so we actually wrote this book together called Common Sense Labs that gives you, if you are a 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old, no symptoms, what labs should you get checked annually so that we can keep a close eye on your metabolic health, your levels of inflammation without breaking the bank? Because I'm with Brian. I never want to order just an ungodly, ignorant amount of labs. That doesn't help anybody. It helps LabCorp and Quest, but it doesn't help anybody else, right? But I do want to check every lab that's going to give me useful diagnostic information about this particular patient. And so I think Common Sense Labs is going to be, first of all, a great manual for patients, for people whose doctors refuse, because then they can go in there armed with that knowledge and say, well, actually, doctor, the reason you want to check a C-peptide is because it's an excellent proxy marker for insulin production in the pancreas and the beta cells. Can you imagine the doctor's face when a patient says that?
Yeah, and I'd love you and I, because of the area we're in, we love it when patients come in research. Other doctors get very upset. Like, why are you talking about this? Well, because the doctors knowing they're gonna have to go home and try to research this. And I remember, when I was in the standard model, it was like people would come in, Dr. Ross says that white oak works for. I'm like, it's gonna be gone in a month. I'm not looking at white oak or whatever, whatever next thing they're selling, right?
Exactly.
And so we start getting jaded. So all these doctors, and that's where I tell my patients too, when you go see, because I have a lot of patients that with a huge HMO and that's nationwide, they won't check an insulin level. They refuse. They won't do it. And I was like, it's $12.95. So they come to me.
Yep.
To get a coronary calcium score, to do an insulin, all these things that their doctor said, no, we won't do. I'm like, hey, the coronary calcium score costs $100. You can figure out all this stuff on one visit. It's not a big deal. So, it's just amazing how there's this obstinance about ordering stuff or even to look into it. As a matter of fact, Ken, you'll like this. I had a patient, she came to me, she lost 58 pounds, came off her insulin, came off her hypertensive medicines. Her mood got better. She comes off all of her stuff, and she's going back to see her doctor, her HMO doctor. And I can't wait. I'm like, I can't wait. I go, this doctor's going to call me. And I said, what happened? Was it, what did the doctor say? She said, nothing. They didn't mention it. Could you imagine your patient loses 58 pounds and you're not going, do you have cancer? What's going on here? Right. So I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, if you as a patient lose 58 pounds and your doctor doesn't comment on it one way or the other, or order some extra tests, that's a huge red flag. You need to find a new doctor. Yes, because they didn't even look at your chart before they walked in the room. Because if any patient of mine loses 58 pounds, the least they're going to get is a congratulations. But I'm going to question that and be like, did you mean to lose 58?
Yeah, make sure you didn't end up getting diabetes, or they already had, but cancer, thyroid problems.
Right. There's a list of medical problems that can cause weight loss. So I'm going to question that patient. How did you do this? Why did you mean to do this? That's a huge question. And if they're like, no, I haven't changed anything, I'm just losing weight like crazy, that's very concerning. But that person's doctor literally didn't even look at the chart before they walked in the room.
But they have a 9-minute visit with the patient, and they got tons of patients. They're seeing 50 patients a day, and it's insane. Sure. Yeah. So that's how you and I kind of stepped out of the traditional model, and you start saying, okay, I could do better care at a cheaper price, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think that's the wave of the future. I'm not sure how everybody's going to work it out financially, both patients and doctors, hospitals, labs. I don't know how all this is going to settle out. But what I do know without doubt is that the current model is unsustainable. It will implode at some point, because the cost every year keeps going up, and not just by a little bit, right? It keeps going up and it keeps skyrocketing, but people are getting sicker. People are getting fatter. So the care is getting more and more expensive, but the patients are getting sicker and sicker and sicker.
And
obviously,
the doctors are being reimbursed less per patient.
Sure.
They keep betting and they go, you don't like it? Too bad.
Right. And so patients think they're the only ones getting screwed. And it is their one life. It is their health that's suffering. But they don't understand that the doctors are second in line for the screwing, because doctors are almost becoming just hourly paid employees with no opinions, no leeway, no practice liberty or freedom whatsoever. I mean, almost in a big healthcare provider situation like that, you could bring in a 12-year-old kid. If you had a 12-year-old kid, they could just read the algorithm and say, okay, do this. There you go. Yeah, you don't even need a doctor to do that at some point.
Were you ever in a big group, or was it like you had pressures on you and all?
No. I'm a lone mountain lion. I was always a solo practitioner. Now, I worked in the ER the first 7 years of my practice. So in that respect, I was in a kind of a group practice. But in the clinic, it was me and one of my nurse practitioners. I never was in a big group.
Yeah, it's just, for me, it's just being around for a while, and I've seen both sides. I've been in a 5-partner practice. I've been in, worked in the hospital a bit. I'm very happy I'm not in the hospital anymore, lifestyle wise. And, it's really a tough road. There's a lot of controversies, a lot of pressures on these doctors. And, I like to pick on doctors, but I get it. I feel bad because the reason they don't know this stuff and they're not looking is they've lost their sense of being inquisitive, saying, I wonder, like you and I are, we don't have to be that smart to say, gosh, I wonder why this is happening. Why am I seeing 5 patients in a row, their knees don't hurt? Can this be with the lifestyle change? Could this be a possible thing? Or there's coming and saying, like one of my best days, they interview my patient for Fat Fiction and the movie, and they interview one of my patients, and they cut it out of the movie because it was probably too controversial at the time. And she says, like, because she was diabetic, she reversed her diabetes, everything got better in her life. But she says, weight loss, great, diabetes, great, I'm off meds. But she said, for the first time in my life, I saw the birds outside, and it was like I walked through a fog and it just opened and I could see the light. And she said, I started cleaning my house. I started visiting with my neighbors, started, doing stuff I enjoy. I'm thinking, man, if you want to cure physician burnout, like hear stories like that where people go, I'm enjoying life again. I'm laughing again.
Because in reality, Brian, that's why we all went to med school, was to help people heal, mend bones, cure disease. None of us went to manage chronic disease. That was not our dream when we were 12 years old. I think I'd like to spend my life managing chronic disease. Nobody said that. We wanted to be a healer. We wanted to cure people, help people, change their life, improve their life. And you hear this in the low-carb community of healthcare providers all the time. It's like, this is fun again. I actually like being a doctor. I look forward to Monday morning because I know that I'm actually helping people get healthier. And that's what I went to medical school for, was to help people. And so
for you doing the labs, and when like now I love looking at labs, like, oh, it's been 3 months. Let's look at the lab. We're excited. The patient's excited. Everyone's excited to see the labs. And you're like, oh my gosh, look at that. You know, it's just so much more fun that before it's like, now it's higher. Okay, your A1C went up. Now we have to put you on this drug. Now we're going to do this. Now, it's like, oh my gosh.
But I love the degree of empowerment it gives the patient. Think about that. Literally, even if they mess up and fall off the keto wagon, right? And they just go hog wild at the Bonanza buffet for 3 months and their A1C doubles. They're still empowered because they know exactly what caused that. As opposed to, if you went to any other doctor, they'd be like, it's just chronic and progressive. I'm going to start you on insulin. No, you did this. You did it to yourself. And that's the bad news. But the good news is you can also undo it, just like you did it. So go home and stop it. Stop eating the donuts, and your A1C will come right back down. And so it gives patients a degree of empowerment over their own health that nothing I've ever seen empowers patients quite like a proper human diet. Once they get the basic principles and the basic concepts, you can't trip them up. And they might indeed stray, right? They might fall short of the glory. But then they always know what to do. Whenever they get sick and tired enough, they're like, okay, this is stupid. I'm going back to the proper human diet.
Yeah, I have a patient. He lost 200 pounds, a young guy, great guy. And I asked him one day, we were on a walk. My patient and I get together for walks over here and there. And I said, what would happen if you gained all your weight back? What would you do? What would you do if you gained all your weight back? And he said, I'd lose it again. Right. And I have a friend who's a multimillionaire. I asked him, I said, what would you do if you lost all your money and you were destitute? And he said, I'd make it back. I figured out a way to make it back. He said, I don't need it. But I said, so once you know you can do it, and that's a problem is people say, like you said, you have a chronic progressive disease, and that's all we can do is manage it and prolong it. And you and I have been around, and people wonder why Tro gets upset and why I get upset with people. Sometimes you go, look, I've dealt with the chronic foot ulcers and the amputations and the kidney failure and the blindness and the strokes and the heart, and you're looking like, how come like you and I don't get glory for preventing the disasters that we know are coming, right? If you get someone's A1C, we know it darn well. There's no doubt about it. Getting your A1C from 11 to a 5, what happens to that person's longevity, time with great grandkids and grandkids, and enjoyment of life and no back pain? It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly why when I was 12 years old, I wanted to be Trapper John MD and live in a trailer camper in the hospital parking lot. I just wanted to be that guy that lived at the hospital and took care of people and helped them have better lives. Just imagine managing chronic disease sucks for the patient, but it also sucks for the doctor. And so what I've started doing with my patrons and with other people on social media is I've started to help them understand that they can actually teach their doctor. And so I'll have them take, when Common Sense Labs is out, they'll take it with them. And when he says, why would I order a fasting insulin? They believe it's right here on page 32. Here, see, this is why. Look at this graph. And so that's embarrassing to a doctor if a patient knows more about something than they do. Any doctor's going to be like, well, shit, right? But what's that doctor going to do when he gets home, when she gets home that night? What's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to Google that.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. They're going to be like, I did not know that. My damn patient knew that. I got to figure this out. What's going on here? And so I've had so many of my patrons say, yeah, my doctor's on board now. They say, keep doing whatever you're doing. It's working. I can't get your A1C down to 5.2, but you sure did. So whatever you're doing, you keep doing it and you keep teaching me and I'll help my other patients. And really, my primary goal was to just help millions of people have good metabolic health. But the more I do this, the more I really feel like the more elegant goal is to help doctors understand, whether it's me teaching the doctor or whether it's 100 of their patients teaching them from the bottom up. Because once you change a doctor's paradigm, every patient that doctor interacts with for the rest of their career is now going to get good nutrition advice, right? That's pretty powerful. You're talking about tens of thousands of people.
Yeah, that's the power. That's the power. And that's what I realized too, doing the Low Carb MD podcast. The reason we did that is so that some guy or female, whoever, sitting in their little clinic somewhere goes, look, there's doctor after doctor after doctor doing this medicine. They're all happy and they're getting good results. Because if it was just me saying it, I could be making up my numbers for all you know, right? But
yeah, because you look kind of shifty anyway.
Yeah, I look pretty shifty, but it is. Yeah, it's pretty true. So people are going to look and go, wait a minute, you're saying you're doing all this crazy stuff because it's so outlandish. And I was just kind of laughing about, I talked with Ben Azadi today from Keto Camp, and we were talking and I said, yeah, I remember I would see these flyers people would bring in and go, what do you think of this? It's a chiropractor saying, we'll get you off insulin. I said, no, you can't get off insulin. Right, back in the day, because they're crazy, they're going to kill people, this is dangerous. Now all of a sudden I'm taking people off insulin, and you go, okay, it can happen. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's kind of what Gary Fedke and we all kind of talk about, you know. Exactly.
And that's what, if one patient tells a doctor, hey, look at my A1C, I fixed it with keto, that doctor's not going to listen to that. But when the 5th patient and the 10th and the 20th and the 50th patient, they're going to Google that. At some point they're going to be like, what the hell? All these people can't be crazy. Now, one patient, definitely can be crazy. We both know that. Yeah. But 50 patients have all done this. That means they know something I don't know. I've got to look that up. I can't. And so I'm hoping that doctors' pride and vanity at some point will kick in. And they're like, well, crap, I need to know how to do that too, because it seems very therapeutically important and powerful.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, we have to step back and say, okay, this is what I was told. Like we were all told you have to eat 6 meals a day. You have to balance your sugar. If you're diabetic, you got to eat 6 times a day. It's like, well, if you skip breakfast, the most important meal of the day, you're going to gain weight and you're going to be miserable. And I'm looking at the wife who's, 280 pounds. The husband is 160. And she said, doctor, you have to talk to him about his diet. He's only eating 1 meal a day. I was like, he looks pretty good. And his numbers look good and he's healthy and he feels good. And he said, doc, I work all day and I'm busy. I'm running around. I'm doing stuff. And the wife's eating 6 meals a day like we were supposed to do. And you're like, okay, he's metabolically healthy. You're metabolically sick. And I had to look at that and I think, why in the heck? How can I have a 158-pound guy getting diabetes? It's only obese people get diabetes. Well, no, it's not true. And I tell people now, I have a lady, she's 420 pounds and all of her numbers are perfect. She has lipedema and all of her fats going to her external where you can see it, but her internal organs, everything, her insulin's perfect. Her visceral fat is like 0.8 liters. You're like, oh my gosh, you're actually healthy. But everyone else would look at them and go, that person's going to die of a heart attack. Well, she looks pretty dang healthy and her cholesterol and everything's perfect.
Right. And that's quite rare, but it does happen. It is possible. Yeah.
Yeah, it does happen. So you look at, that's definitely the exception to the rule, but the opposite is also true. There's a lot of people who look good. You go, they look healthy. And then you get their numbers and go, oh my gosh, like they got diabetes and they're like 158 pounds. So and some people just can't get fat. They don't have the luxury of getting fat.
That's exactly right. And one of the most common comments I get on Twitter is people saying, well, what about the Asians or what about the Indians? They live on carbs and they're not fat. And then that's why we have to check lab work, because there are some people who are much more predispositioned to get fat, to fatten easily, as my friend Gary Taubes calls it.
Ask them what their diabetes status is, right?
India exactly.
And China are having it
very easily. But some people don't get fat. They might get a little belly pooch and that's it. But they're severely hyperinsulinemic, pre-diabetic, type 2 diabetic, have fatty liver, and they're going to die in their 60s from a heart attack because their idiot doctor looks at them and just says, well, they're skinny, so they must be healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had people, their doctor hasn't checked an A1C on them, and they're overweight, obese, and they're like, you don't even like look at that. As a matter of fact, I have a high-powered attorney I just got, and I'm looking at his labs. I go, so how long have you had diabetes? He said, I don't have diabetes. I go, your A1C is 7.2. They go, no, they never told me I had diabetes. I was like, oh my gosh, like your insulin. So I check his insulin, check stuff he's never has. Like, oh, now we know. But we tweaked his diet, tweaked his exercise, and he's killing it. And everything's normalized. He's off all of his meds. He's the happiest camper on the earth. And he's upset. He said, no one told me I had diabetes. No one ever said that. It's incredible.
Yeah. That's somebody you really shouldn't make that mistake on as a high-powered attorney. I mean, exactly. I'd hate to be his former doctors.
Yeah, it's amazing, and so, yeah, well, the reason I'll tell you, he had a stroke, and they said that, well, we don't know why he had a stroke. Everything looks pretty good. And there were other confounding factors, but I'm like, well, you have diabetes. That's your risk factor, right?
Yeah. So huge risk factor. Huge.
So anyways, he got educated a lot. He's learning a lot. Now he's going back and he's educating his cardiologist. He's educating all the people. He's a little remote from me up in Northern California, but great guy. But it's all those things. When we see that, it's exciting to say, yeah, we can give you hope and we can work with you. Let's get this done. And the other thing too, in switching was, I was working a lot with HMO patients, and if I saw 22 patients a day, like 20 of them didn't really care. They're like, just give me the drug and I'm going to take my cookies and do this. And that road they're on, and you don't want to, you don't want to go on that ship. I would tell one of my guys, I told him, I said, you're on a ship with a bunch of holes in the hull, and you're going out to the ocean. You want me to go with you? I don't want to go on that trip. I know you're going to sink. I know it's going to happen. So, getting that and getting people to understand, instead of saying, because I think what's happened with doctors and the endocrinologists in particular, they'll say, you know what, he's being the bad cop. He's telling you you can have your cookies and donuts and have that stuff and just shoot more insulin, you'll be fine. And then they're getting ulcers and they can't walk and they're on dialysis,
Absolutely. If you're hyperinsulinemic, whether it's insulin your pancreas made or whether it's insulin you injected, either way, that's a very unhealthy, very dangerous, very high risk thing to have. And so that's why the C-peptide or the fasting insulin are so supremely important to tease out what's going on with metabolic health. It's just mandatory. You have to check that. And I love it when you send a smart patient back to his endocrinologist and back to his cardiologist and is like, yeah, dude, I had type 2 diabetes, which you didn't tell me, by the way. And secondly, now I've reversed my type 2 diabetes, which you also didn't help me with. You maybe should look into this low-carb MD dude.
Yeah, and I think it's that, I think when patients are happy and they're and they can call you. I mean, there's so much wrong with medicine right now. As a matter of fact, one of my new patients who's been an old patient of mine, but he said, I'm not paying Brian $100 a month to come to him. I'll just stay here. And he blows his knee out and he goes, I need to be seen. I can't walk. I'm limping around. He called the office and the doctor said, I'll see you in 7 weeks. And then we'll do a referral to ortho and all this stuff. It's like 7 weeks. You got to limp around for somebody. So he calls me. He's like, Brian, look, here's the situation. I go, you want to see at 2? What are you doing at 2:00 today? Come on in. We got him and his friend. 11 weeks to see his primary. This is the disaster we're in. 11 weeks to see his primary. Then he's gonna have to get an MRI. Then he'd have to get approval. And so the guy goes, look, I can send you to a local imaging place. If you don't want to go through your insurance, $350. $350 gets the MRI. Got the diagnosis. Torn ACL. He's on his way to surgery and getting it done. And his doctor, his friend will not see a doctor for that long. It's access to us is the problem.
Yeah. And that's completely out of control. And that's the part I was talking about earlier. It's just unsustainable. It will implode at some point in the future. Who knows when or why or how, but that is unsustainable.
Yeah, people won't put up with it. I wouldn't. Like if your car breaks down, the mechanic goes, hey, yeah, we'll get your car in like 2 months. Yeah. Good luck. And that's your car. It's not your health and your body,
right. Exactly.
So I think there's a lot of changes coming. I think a lot of people are going to have to sit back and say, look, we just can't have a stamp that says your LDL's this, here's your meds, and here's this. And I think people are getting wise too. I think the last couple of years have really taught people about the importance of metabolic health and exercise and watching your stress level and getting sleep and all those things we've been yapping about. You talking about vitamin D level, you're talking about getting a good thyroid panel, not just TSH, and go, you're fine, right? Yep. You're depressed and your hair's falling out and you got constipation, but you're fine. Your TSH is normal, right, for thyroid.
Yeah, and that's another thing we talk about in the book is a full thyroid panel. What are the tests to adequately check you to see whether you have hyper or hypothyroidism, or if you have a reverse T3 problem, or if you have an autoimmune thyroiditis. You cannot detect all that stuff from just checking a TSH. And the average doctor and most endocrinologists evidently think that's all you need is a TSH. It's the wildest thing I've ever seen. I don't understand it at all. But we go into detail about the full thyroid panel in the book because that's so important. You know, there are millions in the United States alone, probably 9 million people with hypothyroidism who aren't even diagnosed because their doctor checked TSH. It was normal. And they're like, okay, there you go. You're good. See you next year.
Yeah, so I think it's all those things, and we look at it from a standpoint, and you know, like we can see it because of our experience. You look, and I can look back and say, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I see these patients coming from the HMO, and like for years the doctor's like, vegan diet, exercise, vegan diet, exercise, vegan diet, exercise, and you see them getting more diabetic, and they never enter. They go, this advice they're not going to listen to. It's not working, or at least try something different, or you know, they'll say you have to do a liquid diet. You have, you know, it's just incredible. And you know, I think it's hard the longer we're around. I think you start getting more clinical experience, and I think that's one thing in medicine. Like we're just looking for randomized controlled trials, and what the researchers show, and we see all the disaster of, you know, conflict of interest and all these studies that can't get published and the ones that do. And you know, it's like as docs, practicing docs, it's hard because you say, look, our job is to look at, we don't just look for one disease condition. We have to look at what's going to kill my patient? What's the most likely thing? We look at all-cause mortality, and people forget about that. Like, we're just going to look at your heart, or we're just going to look at your knee, whatever, right?
But you know, that's the thing that most patients are most concerned about. Most patients would very much like to not die anytime soon, right? So that's how a doctor should think about this. What's the most likely thing to kill this patient? And your attorney patient you spoke of previously, the most likely thing to kill him was his type 2 diabetes that they had not diagnosed, addressed, or treated. And indeed, it almost did kill him, didn't it? Right? And so, I don't even know what some doctors are thinking. It's like, literally, you should just have Lipitor and Crestor like a race car driver. You should just act like you're sponsored by them because you don't even want to talk about this actual patient's actual health. You just want to make sure they're taking Crestor when they leave your office. Who do you work for? I'm not sure.
Boy, you know, and that's the thing is us old docs, we observe, and I look and I was like, that's odd. Like one day, all these doctors are attacking Jason Fung. And I was like, that's weird. Then the next day they're attacking you. The next day they're attacking me because I stuck up for Jason Fung like an idiot, right? He doesn't need defending. But I was like, you know, it's not that there's a difference of opinion. It was you know, they were showing pictures of him dressed like a clown and just like really saying, look, in Jason's defense, I have tons of people coming to me and saying, I read his book and it changed my life and it saved my life and I reversed my diabetes and I got better. And you guys are making him into a clown. Like, just show some respect for another profession. We may not agree, but at least show respect, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, what's interesting is after all those attacks, the next week, a new drug came out for metabolic disease, for weight loss and diabetes. And guess who was pushing it all? The same doctors that were attacking you guys. And you go, I wonder, could they be getting paid? You start thinking that way and say, could they be being paid by their attacks and their tweets? Maybe. I've never taken a dime for attacking anyone on Twitter. I just do it for fun, right?
Yeah, it makes you wonder when a doctor attacks another doctor who's obviously helped literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people reverse chronic disease and improve their overall health. What kind of doctor are you if you're going to make fun of that doctor? I would be trying to study that doctor.
I'd be spending my time studying and trying to learn.
I need to know what he's doing.
Yep. Pick up the phone and call him and say, hey, what are you doing? I don't understand thyroid. Can you teach me? And I've had great people, you know, that have taken time to educate me, as do you know, by writing your books and doing your, you know, I'm like, oh, there's another YouTube out. Let me take a look at this guy and see what you got to say. Because it's, you know, your information is really good. And I steer my patients towards it. Go, hey, look at this crazy Ken Berry and see what he's talking about. But a lot of people come in and say, oh, Ken Berry did this video. What do you think? I'm like, we kind of think that way. So, you know, I think it's a huge thing. So I've got to ask you. Oh, I have to ask you one thing, because, you know, as a kid, were you inquisitive and like the pain in the butt? And was like, Ken, go sit down in the corner and don't bug me? Or were you just kind of doing your thing until you got older and then started asking questions?
No, I was always a questioner. My favorite word was why. Since probably the age of 3. Why? And I was not joking. I was, you know, sometimes Beckett, my 2.5-year-old, he'll say why repetitively, but it's kind of a game. But I wasn't joking around. I wanted to know why. And that kind of has spilled over into every aspect of my life. Sometimes that's not the greatest trait in, social settings or romantic settings, but it's a great trait to have when it comes to health, nutrition, medicine, science. Why? Why is that? Why did that happen? Why do you say that? What's your reasoning? What's the physiology? Very important question. Every doctor with every patient, if you don't understand what's going on with that patient, you should literally be like, what part of the physiology do I not understand? Which enzyme have I forgotten? Which cofactor have I forgotten? Which rate limiting step have I forgotten? Right? Because it all comes back to physiology. And a lot of people out on social media think that us keto doctors are acting like, oh, keto is a miracle, right? It's magic. But I have to remind them, folks, this ain't magic. This is physiology.
Yeah, and it's taking out the bad stuff, like you're saying, instead of adding all these vitamins and smoking your 2 packs a day and doing all, everyone wants to add in to fix, like you're saying. That's such a truth. And sometimes you say, okay, if you're getting sunburn all the time, get out of the sun. You don't need to be putting on sunscreen and all these things. Just get out of the sun and then you won't be sunburned. You can't say, oh, this cream works, I put it on every night after I'm sunburned. Well, just don't go in the sun and you'll be okay.
Yep. But the problem with that strategy is that nobody can make $1 billion off that strategy. And there are very large corporations that we're all well aware of who make food or food-like products and make pharmaceuticals. They're actually not interested in helping people improve their health at all. That's not, it might be in their public facing statement, but when they're sitting with their board of directors, it's all about how are we going to increase profits? How are we going to increase profits this quarter? That's what it's about, right? And so they're never, ever going to start to, Kellogg's is never going to say, well, you really should start fasting till lunch. Skip breakfast. Can you imagine if a Kellogg CEO said that, he'd be fired before he hung up the phone, right? So that's never going to happen. So what's going to happen is the people are just going to have to take charge and say, look, we are a known species. We've got paleoanthropological literature. We've got research in archaeology and anthropology that goes back eons and eons, millions of years. We know all these things about our specific species. I'll bet there's a species-specific diet for us. And I bet, just like any other animal, if you feed us an improper diet, I bet we'll get sick. We'll get fat. We'll get diabetes. We'll go blind. We'll get fatty liver. But I bet if you feed us a proper human diet, I bet that stuff will be much less likely to happen. And indeed, not only is that common sense, but it's also the truth.
Yeah, and that's old school. Like you look at your grandparents and what they were eating, and your great grandparents is totally different than what we have now. It is not even close. So that's part of it. And plus stress in life and running around like idiots all the time. That we talk about the Mediterranean diet, but it's really the lifestyle of being able to relax a little bit and have fun with your friends and have community meetings and go lawn bowling and do whatever you do and not always be hectic and stressed and like us doctors have done our whole life, right?
Exactly.
So I got to ask you, man, what's life's best medicine for you? Like, where did you go? Like, what did you like when your house burns down, your clinic burns down, all this? I can't even imagine going through that. Yeah. So how did you where was your comfort? How did you keep going after that and not just fold up the tent and say, screw this, I'm done?
Yeah, if it hadn't been for my wonderful wife, Nisha, there's no telling, right? I'd probably be on Skid Row. I'd be a bum or something. But we were sitting on the courthouse steps, watching the remainder of the Berry Clinic burn to the ground. And we were both crying. And she just stopped crying and sat up straighter. And she looked over at me and she said, you know what? It's good that this happened. And when she said that, my immediate knee-jerk reaction was I wanted to slap her, right? It was like, what the hell's wrong with you? What are you talking about? But then that key phrase brought back all of the reading and training I'd done. I've always been a big fan of the Stoic philosophy, right? Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. And all that came back to me. I was like, yes, this does not have to be a disaster. This does not have to be a stumbling block. This can actually be a stepping stone. And while it was certainly a tragedy, I think good things come out of that. I think after that fire, I'm actually now able to help thousands of more people than I ever would have been able to help had I went to work that morning at the Berry Clinic and saw 40 patients and then went home exhausted, right? Yeah, and so she was right. As usual, Nisha's also always right. So I'm glad I took her advice that day and listened and her counsel. And but that was really the thing that just literally flipped the entire paradigm when she said, it's good that this happened. I was like, okay, now I'm on a mission to figure out how is it good that this happened. And the result is, my YouTube channel and the social media presence and the ability to reach out to people in literally every country of the world and say, hey, you're sick and tired of being sick. I can help you with that. And so I give her all the credit, and I do all the work. That's how it works.
Yeah, and that's what you went to med school. And you know what to do is to help people, right? And ultimately, maybe that building was like working those hours. You can't devote time to study. You can't devote time when you're exhausted. And I know exactly how that was, because that's what I was doing too. And I had to realize it was the same thing for me.
In this journey, Brian, the two things that I thought were my most important tools to help people that I worked for years to get were my medical license and my prescription pad, right? Those are the two things I thought that's going to give me the ability to help people. And now, in reality, those are the least two powerful tools in my toolbox.
Yeah, that's something, man. And you know what's interesting is, I just interviewed Petke and, and all of them are saying it was the marriage. It was the relationship that got me through it. And I say the same thing. My wife said, what are you doing? Get out of there. It's killing you. You're killing yourself. You come home not happy. How are your day? Brutal today. I got yelled at by 4 people and I was running behind. I was running around. And she goes, why do you do this? Like, why, and then I go, we're going to take a huge financial hit. She said, and we'll deal. We went through med school. We didn't have any money, and you had an embezzlement in your office, and you didn't get paid for a couple of months. We can deal, and then you do it. And so you go through those life traumas. A lot of people, they just fold up the tents. They go, life's over. I got this bad diagnosis or something happened. And instead of saying, hey, what good can come out of it? And then you look back and say, it's good came out of it, like you're saying. So that's very encouraging too. Yeah,
absolutely. Every stumbling block is also a stepping stone. It just depends on how you look at it. And that's true for every single situation in life, without exception. Even the one you're thinking about right now that you're thinking, oh no, this is an exception. No, it's not.
Yeah, you got through all those things that we worried about studying for these tests and all these things where life's over. And then you go, okay, that was just, you don't even remember it anymore. All these big obstacles. So you just keep moving on and taking another step. Man, it's an honor to have you. I want to be respectful of your time. I knew we'd run over. We didn't have time to trash on Tro. We didn't have time to talk about Southern sayings and all that stuff. You got so many good ones. So I got to have you back, man, to talk about that stuff. And just
anytime, brother, anytime. We can badmouth Tro, but people who know him, they already know the truth. So there's no point.
That's funny. When we started the podcast, because we joke a lot, and people that like Tro go, Brian, why do you pick on Tro so much? And people like me go, Tro, why do you pick on Brian so much? I'm like, see, it's like, but that's a guy thing. We just have to pick on each other. That's just the way it goes.
Well, it's a pleasure, Brian. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, tell people about your 2 books. The one's not available yet. And how do they contact you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I've got Lies My Doctor Told Me, which is for sale at all bookstores. And there's also an Audible if you have ADHD like me and you need to do something while you read a book. And then the new book. Did
you read it, man? Did you do it? Or
no, I didn't. I was going to, but I didn't. I wish I had. And the next one I definitely will. But then the new book coming out in the next few weeks is called Common Sense Labs, and I'll post all over social media when it's available. And I think that's really going to help people start a productive, constructive conversation with their doctor about, why haven't you been checking this? Let's start checking this. And then also, why are you happy with that result when actually this would be a more optimal result? And so then a third book I'm working on, which will be done sometime within the next 5 years, is called The Proper Human Diet. And that is not available and won't be anytime soon, but it's coming one of these days.
We'll talk about it down the road. But you have to send me an advanced copy, so when my patients come in and go, hey, this new book by Ken Berry, I'm going to tell you. I'm like, no, I reread it. I already know about that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know about that. Thyroid, yeah, I know the TSH.
That's right.
So anyways, man, hey, thanks for joining me. Have a great 4th. And thanks for taking time out. Appreciate it. And keep up the good work, man. And thanks for the inspiration of what you went through and how you keep plugging along and helping people. And keep up the good work, man.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information. And hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.